David, a young man hired as a personal driver, thought his new job was his chance to finally escape the weight of unpaid bills and endless rejection letters. But his millionaire boss, Richard, wasn't a man who trusted easily. Suspicion gnawed at him from the very start. To uncover the truth, Richard left a sleek leather briefcase stuffed with cash wide open in the back seat. Every bill, a silent temptation, daring David to take just one. Yet, David's hands never strayed from the wheel. His gaze fixed forward, calm, unreadable. But what came next was something no one, least of all Richard, could have predicted. A single phone call would shatter his doubts, revealing a truth more powerful than greed. A truth that redefined loyalty itself. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, share, and comment below. The iron gates of the Whitmore estate creaked open with a groan, as though even they had grown weary of welcoming strangers. The polished black Mercedes glided through, headlights sweeping over gravel that sparkled faintly in the dawn. Behind the wheel sat David Hale, a man whose face bore the lines of quiet battles. No one ever applauded. His hands gripped the steering wheel firmly, though the scars along his knuckles revealed years of work that had left more wounds than rewards. For David, this job was not just employment, it was survival. A chauffeur's salary was modest by the estate's standards, but for a man drowning under medical bills, it was salvation. Each morning, he whispered a silent prayer before starting the car, praying that this one paycheck might stretch far enough to keep his mother's treatments going, far enough to keep the eviction notice off the door. But the man who had hired him, Richard Whitmore, was no ordinary employer. Richard, a wealthy businessman hardened by betrayal, carried a mistrust that shadowed every relationship in his life. He had seen loyalty dissolve the moment money entered the room. Too many times employees who smiled politely by day disappeared into the night with jewelry, cash, or worse, secrets that could ruin him. Trust was not something Richard gave. It was something he tested repeatedly until the truth was laid bare. When David, only a week into the job, mustered the courage to ask for a salary advance, Richard's suspicions sharpened. Sitting across his oak desk, David's voice wavered slightly as he explained his need. He did not mention the unpaid hospital bills or the sleepless nights pacing beside his mother's bed. He merely said the words, "If possible, sir." His head lowered, dignity fighting against desperation. To Richard, it was a familiar script. Another employee, cloaked in humility, waiting for the moment to betray. That evening, swirling brandy in a crystal glass, Richard voiced his unease to an old confidant. "They are all the same," he muttered. "Kind words, steady hands, then comes the request. First a little money, then something missing from the drawer. I won't be fooled again." His friend offered a measured reply. Or perhaps Richard, the man, is simply in need. Not everyone plots against you. But Richard shook his head. He had been deceived before. His world had taught him to expect betrayal like clockwork. In the servants' quarters, whispers had already started. Two housemaids spoke in hushed tones while polishing silver. The new driver asked for money already, one said, eyebrows raised. "They never last. Give it a month, maybe less." David overheard. He always did. Yet instead of defending himself, he slipped quietly into his room. He unfolded a worn photograph from his pocket. His mother, in her youth, smiling beneath an oak tree. He whispered into the dim light, "Hold on a little longer, Ma. I'll find a way." The next morning, Richard set his first test. He handed David an envelope thick with bills, instructing him to purchase a few items downtown. The amount was far more than necessary. The excess cash was deliberate, a temptation placed carefully in David's hands. Richard's eyes followed the driver as he slipped the envelope into his jacket. Not a flicker of greed crossed David's face. Hours later, when he returned, every penny was counted, every receipt neatly presented. Richard concealed his frustration with a stiff nod to his friend. That night, Richard admitted, he returned it all, every cent,
Either he's patient, or he's planning a bigger betrayal. I'll wait. But beneath his calm exterior, Richard was already crafting a second, larger test. The following week, Richard decided the small errands were not enough. If David was truly a thief, hiding beneath courtesy, then the only way to uncover him was to place temptation directly in his path. That morning, as the car pulled smoothly from the estate, Richard placed a leather briefcase on the back seat. He clicked it open just enough for stacks of bills to gleam in the morning light, their edges sharp and orderly. The case remained half open, a silent invitation. From the driver's mirror, David's eyes flicked briefly toward the back seat. Just one glance, no longer. He shifted gears and focused on the road ahead, his face unreadable. For the rest of the ride, Richard feigned sleep, but his gaze lingered on the reflection of David's eyes, searching for even a tremor of desire. The city streets passed in flashes of neon and chrome. At a red light, the briefcase shifted slightly, revealing another crisp bundle. Richard's pulse quickened, waiting for a tell, a twitch, a stolen glance.
Yet David's jaw remained tight, his posture composed. On the sidewalk, 2 passers-by noticed the car. "That's Whitmore's ride," one muttered. "Wonder how long the new driver will last. Old fool, looks desperate. He'll take his chance sooner or later." Inside the car, David heard. Their words stung, but he gripped the wheel tighter, driving in silence. By the time they reached the hotel, the briefcase lay untouched. David stepped out, opened the door for Richard, and offered nothing more than a polite nod. Richard's gaze darted to the briefcase, then back to David, frustration gnawing at him. No theft, no slip, no sign of greed. That night, alone with his brandy, Richard muttered, "Every man has a price. Every man, why hasn't he shown it yet?" The answer came sooner than he expected. Late one evening, after a grueling boardroom session, Richard collapsed into the back seat, exhaustion etched across his face. David guided the car onto the highway, the hum of tires lulling the night into a fragile calm. Then the phone buzzed in the console. A woman's voice, raw with panic, spilled into the car. "David, it's Mom. She can't breathe again. They say it's worse this time. Please, hurry." David's grip on the wheel tightened, his knuckles whitening. His chest heaved as he whispered under his breath, "Not tonight, God, not now." Richard sat upright. "Who was that?" he demanded. Silence stretched before David finally spoke, his voice breaking. "My mother."
"She's dying. Cancer's taken everything, sir. The doctors don't know if she'll last the night." The weight of the confession filled the car, heavy, suffocating. Richard's mind replayed every test. The envelope of cash, the open briefcase, a man drowning in debt, watching his only family slip away, had still returned, every bill, untouched. Shame rose in Richard's throat, hot, undeniable. For years, he had believed loyalty was a myth. Yet here sat a man who had every reason to take, and still refused. As the car sped toward the hospital, Richard stared out the window, silent, but his heart began to shift. For the first time in decades, doubt entered his cynicism. The hospital air was heavy with antiseptic and quiet despair. Families huddled in corners, whispering prayers into trembling hands. David moved quickly, shoulders hunched, his entire body bent beneath the weight of fear. Nurses led him to a room where a frail woman lay pale against the sheets, her breathing shallow, machines beeping in fragile rhythm. Beside her sat David's sister, holding their mother's hand with a desperation that words could not express. David fell to his knees at the bedside, tears spilling, as he whispered, "Stay with me, Ma. Just a little longer." In the doorway, Richard lingered. He hadn't planned to follow, but something compelled him forward. For the first time, he saw David not as a potential thief, but as a son, crushed beneath a burden too heavy to carry. The hardened shell around Richard's heart began to fracture.
The next morning, David was summoned to Richard's study. He entered quietly, expecting reprimand or dismissal. Instead, on the desk lay a thick folder stamped with the hospital's insignia. Every bill, every treatment, every future appointment, marked paid in full. David froze. His lips parted, but no sound came. Richard's voice, calm, yet uncharacteristically gentle, filled the room. I tested you again and again. I expected you to fail, to prove me right about the world, but you didn't. Even with everything you carry, you never took what wasn't yours. You proved me wrong. He leaned forward, his eyes steady. From today, you are more than my driver. You will oversee my household, my staff. And as for your mother, she will get the care she deserves, no matter the cost. David's chest heaved. He lowered his head, voice breaking, as he whispered, "Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you." His hands trembled, as though the weight of gratitude was heavier than the weight of his suffering. Richard leaned back, exhaling, a breath he hadn't realized he held. For years, he had believed money was the only shield against betrayal. Yet this man had shown him something wealth could never buy: integrity in the face of desperation. As David stepped from the study, the photograph of his mother pressed against his heart, Richard understood a truth that shook him more than any betrayal ever had. He hadn't just hired a driver. He had found a man who reminded him that loyalty still existed, even in a world consumed by greed. And in that discovery, Richard found himself changed, not by the wealth he hoarded, but by the rare soul who showed him what true wealth really meant. He had found the one thing he thought he'd lost forever: loyalty. If this story moved you, don't just scroll away. Subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Like and share to spread the lesson of integrity. And tell us in the comments what you would have done if you were in David's shoes.